Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Behind the Reel podcast. We have episode number 11 of our second season, and we've got a special guest today, Garrett Morgan, and he won the All American Kayak Series event at Lake Conway just this past weekend. 2-day event out there. Had some tough weather come in, shake things up a little bit, but he was able to take home that real sweet. I want to call it a trophy, but it's a pretty sweet award that they give out, and so that is one that might take up the whole entire mantle. But definitely a nice addition to the trophies that he's collected over the years. Definitely want to give a shout out to the All American Kayak Series. They've got a pretty cool thing going on. We've had some guests on in the past, including our last guest, which was Tyler Cole. He was on the show to talk about the Lake of the Pines event. And so, yeah, if you guys are looking to get into some more regional events that are going to definitely push the envelope on the level of competition, you definitely check out the All American Kayak Series, kind of based in the Midwest. Give them a look. And we will go ahead and get things kicked off tonight. I do want to apologize. I think I had originally marked this for 8 p.m. tonight, and I had forgot to update that. So we'll have plenty of people joining in after our live broadcast here tonight. But if you want to join in, ask some questions along the way, make sure you put those over there in the comments, the live comment section over on the side of the screen, and we will get to those throughout the show tonight. So do me a favor, guys, and share this video in your local fishing group. Share it with a buddy, and we'll get this out there and try to introduce some new people to kayak fishing. And without further ado, I think I'm going to go ahead and bring Garrett on, and we're going to get tonight's show started. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, man, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Appreciate y'all having me on. And hey, man, as we get started, I wanted to mention, since that tornado came through here last Friday in the area, we may have a little delay here and there on the internet. It'll last about 7 seconds, and it'll get right back. So if that happens, just, for your viewers and for you, just stay tuned. I'll be back.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate the heads up there. And yeah, that may be, something that we talk about here in just a minute, and maybe how, that weather may have affected what you were going to do out there on game day. And, I really am not tuned in if as far as like the news and stuff goes. So I'm not sure how bad it was, but I've heard some tidbits here and there. There was quite a bit of damage in that area, wasn't there?
Yeah, in the Little Rock area, which, Conway is about 15 minutes from Little Rock.
Yeah.
There was one community hit pretty hard. Luckily, it was during the workday. So the majority of people weren't home, which was a huge blessing. A lot of homes destroyed, trees fell on homes. Luckily for the folks that lived in those communities, a lot of them were gone. It's made, things a struggle for folks for a little bit as far as electricity and getting around their neighborhoods. But the good thing is the majority of folks, still got their lives. They're going to be able to rebuild. The federal government, state government been great going in and helping those people and getting them all set up. FEMA's been here on the ground and helping our folks out. So unfortunate situation. Really lucky to only hit one little neighborhood there in Little Rock, and then it kind of picked up, went to North Little Rock, hit a little spot there, and then went over to Wynne, Arkansas, and tore some things up. Pretty good, but overall, I feel like we're pretty lucky that a lot of folks were at work.
Yeah, definitely, and we feel your pain over here in Kansas. We seen a lot of tornadoes over here, throughout the years, and but yeah, glad to see that. I think everybody fishing the competition was, at least good to go, and sounds like you guys are going to be back up and running probably here before too long. Is Conway like your home lake? It is,
and I'll tell you, the very first kayak tournament I ever signed up for, I fished big boat tournaments around 2004 to 2007 or so
Mhm.
with my brother who lives in Hot Springs. And we
Okay.
fished against guys that are now professional fishermen.
Yeah.
And, that little local trail there was tough. And we got our butts kicked. And he ended up having two boys. And so he kind of got out of the tournament fishing scene. They were twins and took a lot of time and all that.
Mhm.
But I'd always fished growing up. Um, Kind of put it aside when I was in college from 2001 to 2005. I played football there. I was a field goal kicker here at Central Arkansas. That's how I even ended up in Conway. I grew up in East Texas
Mm.
and, came here to play football. But then I would travel down. My brother was living in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and go fish with him. And then we kind of got out of that thing, and I would still fish a little bit. Was still kind of playing football after college a little bit in the arena leagues and doing some semi-pro stuff. And then when I finally really set that aside, which was 2014, was the last year I played arena football.
Mm.
I was still wanting that kind of competition, and
Sure.
that part of my life was kind of missing. I did some softball tournaments and played softball a little bit for a while. And one day I'm scrolling through Facebook and I see something about a kayak fishing tournament on Lake Conway. And I fished Lake Conway since I moved here in 2001. So I knew the lake well. And at the time, I only lived, about 8 minutes from a boat ramp. And
Mm.
so I messaged the director of the tournament and said, hey, listen, I really want to fish, but I got to coach soccer that day. I got two little girls. And, I'd have to, leave the water about 8, go coach for an hour or two, and then I'd come back and finish the tournament. Would that be cool? And
Mm.
they were like, well, yeah, as long as you, feel like you do okay and catch 5 fish. I'm like, well, dude, I live 8 minutes from a boat ramp. I think I'll be fine if y'all will allow it. Be cool. And so I do. But the crazy part is I forgot that it was pitcher day at the soccer game. So instead of me being there for an hour, I end up,
Mm.
there for what seemed like 2.5 hours. And instead of going to my original spot that I was going to fish at the second half of the day, because I ended up there in Bologna, Arkansas, where the girls played soccer, which is about 15 minutes from the lake. I just went to the nearest boat ramp
Mm.
on the way back. And I show up there, and I was the only one there. And a month previous, I'd been catching some good females there on the outer part of the lake. And I ended up winning my very first tournament fishing that spot.
Wow.
And I say all that because that played a role in this All American Series.
Mm.
But here's the funny thing. That was, I want to say 2017 or 2018, somewhere. I think 2017.
Okay.
I had not won an event on Lake Conway since.
Really?
And I've kind of had that home water curse where it's like, oh, I've caught a fish over here. I've caught a fish over here. I caught a fish over here. And it's like, sometimes you can be on water too much and be
Mm.
too comfortable with it that you kind of get spun out before the event ever starts. It's like, where do I go? Where do I want to start? Maybe they're over here. Maybe they're over there. And it's like you have too many options. Whereas
Okay.
sometimes I'll show up at a lake that I've never fished and go do great because, I only got one game plan. And it's like
Sure.
it's either going to work or it's not. But with Conway being my home lake, it was great to me my first event, and it's been a struggle ever since. So
Mm.
we can get into how I finally kind of put that behind me on this one.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. Is it because you've kind of caught fish everywhere on the lakes, so you just have a hard time like honing in on that one area? If you're not catching them right away, you feel the need to.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Has been a lot of it in the past, and I kept trying to fish memories too.
Yeah.
So I'd been back to that one area that I mentioned numerous times in tournaments,
Hmm.
and it's bit me in the butt so many times. And it's kind of the middle of the lake, launch, it's got some deep water around it. And I swore going into this event, and even last year, I swear to God, I was never going back to that spot. And that's where I ended up fishing on day 2. But I
Okay.
was doing what I told myself I was going to do. I was going to fish the conditions. I wasn't going to fish memories, and I wasn't going to just fish the lake that I knew. I was going to fish the conditions. And it just so happened, the way the wind blew on day 1, in my heart and in my thoughts, like that was the perfect spot to go to on day 2. The wind had blown into that cove all day long on day one, so I knew there was good bait in there, and I felt like there were already fish probably pulled up spawning in there, and I felt like there would actually be an aggressive bite there in the morning versus that normal kind of spawning bite that you got to kind of work for.
Okay. So you go into day 2. Where were you at on the leaderboard going into day 2?
So, day 1 was tough. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
It's my home lake, and I struggled. At 2:00, I had 3 fish. But about 9:30 that day, I went by a tree in 2 foot of water, and I went out of the Palarm Creek area, which is, very popular area. A lot of anglers fish there. It gets a lot of pressure. There have been a lot of big fish being caught there in practice. I had some good practice there, but my original bite that I wanted to fish in practice was dead after that weather. I had actually put on a punching rig, and there's some good mats in there, and I don't know why I was still trying to get a punching bite. Hadn't got one all year. I was going through some mats, and I was going from one mat kind of to the next, and I go by this tree that's in 2 foot of water, and I just kind of barely pitched that 1.25 ounce weight up there. And when you slide one of those and you hit the tree, it just smoothly just slides down, as long as you don't bang it. And if there's a fish in there, they'll just swim right at you with it. And that happened. I set the hook. Fish jumps up. I could tell it was a good one. I didn't land the fish. Okay. So I ended up fishing some other stuff. The wind's blowing hard. The home field advantage played here. I knew there was a spot by the ramp that would stay clean. It was protected from the wind. And I knew there was fish there. So I figured I'll run all the way over there, try to pick up a limit, try to pick up a fish. At that time, I had 2 fish. I run all the way over there and ended up catching a fish, which then that kind of was a detriment to me for a bit because I stayed there thinking, I can find 2 more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked down eventually, and I got about an hour left. I've stayed in this area so long, but I'm telling myself, hey, if that's a spawning fish that you missed earlier, you can run back to that tree and catch that fish. It's going to be there. You've given it time. It's probably gotten comfortable again. And so I take the autopilot, put it on high, run back across the lake, go over to that spot, pitch up on that tree, and I catch a pretty good fish. All right, sorry about that. That's that little delay I was telling you. So it only lasts a couple seconds. But anyway, so I run all the way over there, pitch up on the tree, and catch a 17-incher. And I get it in the boat, and that's my 4th fish. And I'm, get my picture, and I'm looking at the fish, and I'm like, that's not the fish I hooked.
Yeah.
And I'm telling myself, that's the male. And it was skinny, didn't have any eggs. And so while the fish is still in the kayak, I re-rig my, little bait there. And I'm like, I'm going to pitch this fish a little bit out here to the side so it doesn't run right back to that tree. And when I do, I'm going to pitch right in that tree. And if there's a female in there, I'm going to catch it. And I timed it up perfect. When that fish hit the water, I pitched, up against that tree. And I caught an 18-something inch female that was in there with it. And, I got lucky. I'll be honest with you. I got lucky to have a limit on day 1. That's how I ended up getting my limit. Was I found a spawning pair on a tree.
Wow. And no fish after that?
I caught one. I literally made the cast at like 2:59.
Mm-hmm.
I hook into the fish. It runs around a pole and kind of gets wrapped up. And I'm trying to work it around. Then it runs through some grass. And, finally I wrestle this thing in the boat. I get the fish on the board, get the identifier out. I pick up my phone to take the photo, and literally it rolled over right in front of my face, 301. And I was like, son of a biscuit. That's just kind of how it goes, right? But I was very fortunate to find that limit on day 1. Day 1 was tough. The pre-fishing had been great on moving baits. Chatter baits were working really well. Just swimming a crawl through grass was working really well. Actually, it caught some fish on a frog. But that kind of went to crap for the most part, as we started the competition. But day one, the wind blew the entire day. And I'm talking about big gusts. And you're talking about a shallow lake where it gets really dirty. And that Palarm Creek area, which is very popular, got really dirty in a hurry. Some of the water that was feeding the creek, which is Palarm Creek, was coming in a lot colder. And so I was ditching that plan for day two. And I think a lot of people, because they knew the guy that won the one day event that was going on at the same time, fished out of there. I think a lot of people migrated to that area, not realizing that it had changed so much from the time we pre-fished to even day one to day two. And I knew that there was just going to be more water, coming in the back of that thing and kind of making some of those areas a little colder. So with the direction the wind blew all day, I felt like that bait was blown to that main lake pocket that I had fished all those years ago, that I swore to God I was never going to go to again because it bit me in the butt so many times. And I wrestled all night back and forth after day one. I was like, I feel like it's where you need to go. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, you told yourself don't go there again in a tournament. But, I had also told myself, fish the conditions. Yeah. Don't fish the lake, fish the conditions, and things will work out. And so I went over there to that area. I was surprised to see I was really the first one that was there early. There were two other guys that pulled up, but I don't know where they were in the competition. They showed up a little late. They didn't really seem to be in a hurry. Didn't really seem to be that into it. And they kind of fished some main lake stuff. And I pulled up on a point where I've caught some really big fish. And I told myself I'm going to give it 10 casts. If that school of fish is there like it can be, I'll knock them on the head and I'll win this thing and I'll be good. Well, I make 10 casts. I don't get a bite. And, it's just running a rattle trap across some rocks there. And so I end up telling myself, I'm like, well, I'm going to run this cove real quick. And it's a small cove. I'm like, if I don't get a bite, by the time I get back to the truck, I'm going to load up and leave. I'm going to go fish some new water. Well, I'll probably go 100 yards and catch fish, go another 20 from there, catch another fish, go another 25 yards from there, catch another fish, go another 15 yards from there and catch fish. And, needless to say, I had 5 fish before I got back to the truck. And my smallest at the time then was a 14.5 incher. And I caught most of those fish in little spots where they should be spawning, like up against a cypress tree or right up under a grass mat or right up against a laydown or between a cypress tree and a dock. And so, I wasn't catching those fish on the initial, pitch, because it was kind of more that get out of my nest type of bite, where they're just grabbing it and kind of getting it out of there. Yeah. And so I really had to hunker down and be persistent. And I did video day 2. It's on my YouTube. If anybody wants to check that out, Garrett Morgan Outdoors. But it's pretty cool because I didn't edit the video on a couple of those fish where you can literally see how long it took to catch that fish and how many baits I went through and how many times I, kind of changed things up to get those bites. But it was a lot of fun and it was really cool. But after I made that run and I went back to some of those fish I missed, if you watch the video, there's a couple fish I missed. I went back to those fish and couldn't get them to bite. Probably waste a little bit of time doing that, actually. But I load up and I go to Pierce Creek, which was another area where some good fish have been caught in practice by myself and a buddy. And it didn't get fished a whole lot on day one because of the wind. I run all the way over there. Told myself I was going to give it an hour. If I didn't get a bite, I was going to leave. And I stuck to that plan. I didn't get a bite. It had completely changed colors as far as the water goes. It went from a, semi-clear to pretty much mud in there. Temperature had changed quite a bit. It was much colder. So I load up, run back to Palarm Creek where I fished on day 1 because at this point the sun's been up all day on day 2. And even though that water had been coming in the back was colder, it now had time to warm up the majority of that cove. And so I figured hey, I could go back to that area where I caught some fish yesterday, go find one cold fish and probably win this tournament. But as I headed over between Pierce and Palarm, I took a curve a little too sharp and my terminal tackle box went flying out of the back of the kayak. And so I ended up burning about 25 minutes looking for it in the ditch. I did find it. and threw it back in the truck and got myself back over to Palarm. Went across, straight from the ramp, found some hard bank, ran a chatterbait on there, cold a 14 for a 17, and I felt pretty good at that point. But at the same time, also, I knew that there's the potential on that lake for somebody to catch 100 inches. I mean, it didn't happen. The bite was much tougher, but I can tell you that there's a lot of spots on that lake where if you run across them, you can do it in a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were talking about the natural state event that they had kind of running in conjunction with day one.
Yeah.
And so that was like a 95-inch limit that won that deal. But and then between your day one and your day two, you ended up with 173 and 3/4, and you had the lead by 10 inches there.
Yeah, with some of the anglers that were in that event, with Marty and Corey kind of nipping on my heels,
Yeah,
I fished till the end. I can tell you that because,
sure.
like I said, I've been on that lake and caught 100 inches in a spot less than the size of a coffee table. So I'm definitely not going to ever feel 100% comfortable on that lake. That like, oh, I got this thing won.
Yeah,
because I've spent so much time on it, and I know the potential that it has, and some of the fish that are in there. Luckily for me, it seemed like that weather really hurt that fishing. The fellow that it did well on day one of that NSKA event, it sounded like listening to him talk at that award ceremony, because I was in both events.
sure.
He was fishing way slower than everybody else.
Yeah,
He was fishing a trick worm. He was fishing it in the pads. Me, that's very tough for me to do. It's hard for me to fish that slow. Brad Harmon is the guy's name. He did really well in our fall series that we put on, and I think that was really a good thing for him, as an angler, that he never really stopped fishing last year. He went through the regular season, went through the championship season, then he fished this fall series that wrapped up in January, and then he was ready for February. So he's kind of had a rod in his hand quite a bit throughout the course of the year, which I always say time on the water is so valuable for folks, and just kind of staying at it and kind of keeping some practice sessions going is always good. But he was very patient. I think he's probably more patient than the rest of the field. I don't think he fished a very large stretch, from what it sounded like. So he showed what that lake can do. I think if some of the rest of us would have slowed down a little bit more, we might could have been up there with him. But he definitely ran away with that day one event. It was pretty impressive to see.
Yeah. I'm wondering though, like, so you were talking about fishing the conditions, and a little bit about how you had to really switch things up between day one and day two. So for the people that didn't do that, if you look down the leaderboard, you'll see some people that kind of struggled both days, but then there's a few guys that did really well on day one and not good at all on day two. Like what were they missing? What information maybe had they not gathered, or what was your strategy or your mindset, I guess, going into day two that differed from the first?
Well, I tell you what I was looking for going into day two. I was trying to think about spawning pockets, because I found that spawning pair, remember, late on day two.
Sure.
When I went through the first time, I know for a fact there was one fish there, but when I went back there the second time, I caught two. So I was thinking, okay, well, if there was a spawning pair and I was on a north bank and it was protected and it was somewhat clean, I was thinking of areas that, okay, what little areas are going to stay clean? What wouldn't have been impacted terribly by the wind, but could have also been helped by the wind? So what had a mouth, pretty much of a cove, where bait would have been blown to the mouth, but then that muddy water, because of the shape of it or whatever, wouldn't have impacted the entire cove. There would have been protected little pockets that stayed clean. And that really, I'll tell you, that was the ticket on day 2. I found
Mm.
clean water, super clean water, compared to the rest of that lake. And I think just kind of that was the home field advantage. Like I knew where
Yeah,
those spots were going to be, and
sure.
some of that main lake, some of those little main lake coves will stay clean. You know, especially with the south wind, kind of that we got on day 1. If you kind of know where they're at. So that was my mindset going into it. I think a lot of folks migrated to Pilarm just because they knew that there were so many good bags that came out of there. I mean, I fished out of there on day 1. I got 4th in that local event, and I was in 2nd in, the All American Series. And then Brad had fished out of there. Heck, I even passed him when he caught the 21 incher on the
Mm.
first day. And, he's the guy that won the NSK event. So there were some good limits that came out of Pilarm, and I think some people just migrated over there, whereas I had been in there all day, and I'm like, I'm getting out of here. Like,
Yeah.
it shouldn't have been that big of a struggle to find 5 fish in here. I like, again, I felt very lucky to find 5 fish on that day, but based on practice and based on how the rest of the lake was fishing, it shouldn't have been that hard. I felt like there would have been a lot of folks with a limit over the course of the weekend. But that little area got impacted by the weather and the water coming in the back quite a bit.
So it wasn't really that the conditions changed between day 1 and day 2 is kind of what I'm hearing. It's more you just use the information, that you gathered at the end of day 1 there to kind of set you up for a strategy that kind of differed your approach on day 1.
Sorry, man, it cut out for that 7-second delay. What'd you
Okay.
say?
No, I was just saying, like, it's not that the conditions changed necessarily between day 1 and day 2. It's just you were taking the information that you gathered with that fish catch that kind of made you at least feel like you understood what the fish were doing, and then you use, like you say, your home field advantage to determine where those fish might be at. So it wasn't that the weather or this or that was different between day 1 and day 2, right? Or
Yeah,
did some of that stuff kind of change as well?
we weren't going to have that hard wind that we had on day 2. So the area I fished on day 2, I had heard there were 12 kayak anglers on day 1.
Oh, wow.
All right. The wind scared a lot of those folks out of there.
Yeah,
Okay. From what I understand, a lot of them were gone by midday.
sure.
And then on day 1, well, on day 2, only two people showed up.
Right.
And like I said, they showed up late, and they really didn't come back in the coves where I was. So I kind of had that area to myself, all except for one local guy that wasn't even in the tournament that knew that we were fishing a tournament that came in there. It was a
Yeah.
little bit of a head scratcher, but he went through some of that water before I even had a chance to get to it, which I think that maybe the reason why some of those fish that I missed, I couldn't get them to bite again. I kind of have a suspicion he may have caught some of those
Yeah.
because he went through some of that area before I did. I don't think he knew any better. He seemed a little green or a little fresh, but he was courteous. He was cool. He was nice. But sometimes I'm scratching my head when you have a fellow kayak angler that knows there's a tournament going on and just shows up at the ramp, just wants to go see what they can do. Same day
Yeah.
you're fishing, and it's like, all right, buddy.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure there probably wasn't any ill intentions there,
Oh
but
no, like I said, I don't think he knew any better.
but
But
that does make you wonder.
yeah,
Okay, so would you consider yourself like a more of a power fisherman then?
no, I really wouldn't. I'm really adaptable, and I've prided myself on that over the last few years. I think my strength is probably flipping and throwing a jig.
Yeah.
But I've won tournaments throwing a drop shot. I've won tournaments throwing a wacky rig. Probably the thing that I don't do well enough is fish 25 foot and deeper.
Okay.
When we start getting into that kind of depth, I struggle a bit. I'm more of a shallow water fisherman for the most part, but I feel like I can always find fish shallow for the most part. So, and hadn't hurt me too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I've made a conscious effort to develop my skill set over the years. And that's kind of happened by circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few years back, I was leading, not leading. I led day 2. I was in 6th place going into the KBF National Championship down on Caddo. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 2018 or 2019. And cold front hit. I had no answer for it. The rest of that year, I figured out how to throw a drop shot, how to throw a wacky rig, and how to throw a Ned rig. I'd never fished those before. But now that's something I always carry with me. It's something I would have in my arsenal in case I'm presented that situation again. And I have been since then, and it has paid off. So just kind of the more experience you get, you figure out, hey, like you didn't have this in your tool bag here, and that bit you in the butt. So you need to figure out how to do that. And so over the years, I've kind of just added a little bit more here and a little bit more here, but it's come from failure. I have failed because I didn't know how to do something. And so I, watch a few videos or go fishing with somebody who knows how to do it, and just try to pick up new techniques.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Okay. So I've got, would you go with, if you had to choose, would you go with a spinner bait or a chatterbait? Maybe this time of year.
I like a chatterbait.
Okay.
I gotta say,
were you ever a spinnerbait guy? Or has it always kind of been the chatterbait for you?
I don't think I ever really was a spinnerbait guy. I think I threw a swim jig probably more than a spinnerbait ever. But yeah.
Now, what's your go-to then on the chatterbait?
I like anything with a green pumpkin blade. Okay. JP Custom Baits, which is local here, they make one for me. And they have a color, my color called G Money. It's green pumpkin and orange, and it has a green pumpkin blade on it. And I'll tag that up with some sort of fire crawl a lot of times. Trailer, and it really does well. So
nice.
That's my go-to. The shiny blades, the silvers and the golds, they get overused, I feel like. So I think that green pumpkin blade can get you a lot more bites.
Yeah, I like that. I've been throwing a green pumpkin jig with an orange craw trailer on it here lately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I probably already know the answer to this one. Jig versus Ned rig.
Jig all day.
Now, what's your go-to jig setup?
Yeah, that's definitely the G Money jig. That's what I won the Lake Fork event on last year with Bassmasters. But
nice.
It's pretty much a green pumpkin orange, and then I use a Rage Crawl on that in a green pumpkin orange as well. And man, that thing has caught fish all over the United States at this point. But it's interesting how I even came about that. There's a river up here that feeds Gers Ferry Lake, not far from me, about an hour's drive, and it's overpopulated with fish. And so me and a buddy Eddie, we go up there, we catch a few fish, fillet some out because the river's real clean, and it's good fish to eat. And we're filleting fish and find these good-looking crawfish and all these fish. I take a picture of one of them, and this is the cool thing about having a custom jig maker.
Yeah.
I take a picture of them and send it to JP Custom Baits, Jared Predmore, and say, make me a jig that looks just like this. And he pretty much did. And I've used it on all these Ozark bodies of water around here in Arkansas, and it works pretty great.
Heck yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. Texas rig. Let's see. I put Texas rig versus Nico rig.
Texas rig.
Yeah. Say Marty Hughes was not far behind you. You mentioned that, so we know what he would have said.
Yeah, he told me a little bit about his Nico stuff that he does. So
did he?
He's a cool dude. Yeah.
You better not let any of his secrets out here tonight.
No, I won't do that at all.
Okay, one other thing here, Casual Bass Guys, wanting a rundown of like your kayak setup.
Yeah, man, I run a autopilot 120 from Old Town. I've been in one of those for 3 years now. I really like sitting. I've been asked recently after that
Hmm.
YouTube video came out as to why I don't stand more.
Mhm.
I feel like you just got better control in the kayak because that rudder is foot controlled.
Mm.
Um, and also, I've just learned I spook less fish if I'm sitting down.
Mm.
I've spooked quite a bit of fish by standing up, I've noticed. And so over the years, I've, you know, learned to cast a lot better sitting down. And,
Yeah.
I feel like I can skip under docks better sitting down.
Mhm.
So that's the kayak. Battery wise, I run a Z Pro on there. It's a 110 hour amp. I can run that for 2 days and I don't even have to charge it. Um, I do that on purpose because if I'm away at an event and I don't have access to charge or I'm too tired to charge, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So I do run a Humminbird Helix 7 on there. It has side imaging, which I rarely use, but I do use it occasionally. My graph, I primarily use just to know the water temperature and depth for the most
Mm.
part. Um, will I ever be a live scope guy? Probably in the future. I feel like I can still be competitive right now and compete with folks um, just by using instincts and fishing, 8 foot or less. If I get to a point where I feel like, hey, I'm just definitely going to get my head beat in if I don't go to it, I probably will. I'll probably end up with it just because I want to try it. I don't want to get left behind. But we'll see how that plays in the future. As far as rods, man, I'll carry about 6 to 8. And as you saw in the video, if you've watched it, that's really just to have more options in case I miss a fish.
Mhm.
I'd throw something in behind it. I'll have a wacky rig on most of the time or a trick worm, kind of as a follow up bait. Sometimes I've used a um, a shaky head for that as well.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have a little follow up bait and a couple different options on there. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But anyways, I'll carry a crate with about 4 or 5 tackle trays. Okay, sorry.
No, you're
Think
good.
think we're back good. But I carry an old school milk crate with some rod holders on it. I have about 5 or 6 tackle trays on there. One of them has terminal tackle, other one has some jigs, and then depending on the season, depends on what the other ones have on it. And then I have one big cooler bag that has way more plastics than I should ever take to an event. But I'm one of those guys that I take them anyways.
Yeah.
And then I'll definitely keep a net in there. And that's pretty much the rundown for the most part on the kayak. I will tell y'all this. I did find some really cool navigation lights at Academy Outdoors that you can kind of screw on the front and unscrew. So you can move them from one kayak to the other. Because if I run to a Hobie event, of course, I can't use the motor. So I could take that off. And it wasn't that expensive. It was like, I don't know, $30 or something.
Mhm.
But it came with a 360 light for the back and the red and green light for the front of the kayak. And I think it's the state of Tennessee now is making you have, that red and green navigation light if you have a motor. I think
Yeah.
a lot of other states are going to that
We do too.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a cool little tip there. I've put that on the front of that autopilot, but I've also moved it over to the pedal drive. Just, hey, I want people to see me when I'm out there. I won't get run
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, for sure. What about on your graph? Do you use the Lake Master card?
I don't, man. I
No.
mean, I don't use it. I have the app on my phone
Yeah.
that I look at prior to the event, and I'll kind of go through Navionics on my phone and look at
Nice.
stuff. But man, I pretty much just fish instincts for the most part.
You ought to, if you don't have it, you ought to check out the new one from Humminbird, the One Boat Network. Do you have that one yet?
I don't know.
They used to call it Fish Smart, and you could kind of do a lot of the same stuff. But I think I even signed up for like a free trial, or maybe it was like a discounted trial or something like that. But like you get the whole year pretty cheap, or maybe even free. I can't remember. But it'll basically give you access to all the maps on your phone, so you can, from the camper or whatever the night before, you can
Yeah.
kind of scope out the lake, and kind of like the Navionics one. Um, but it's nice because it offers all the different shading. You can shade the different depth zones and kind of find those little ditches and offshore, humps and stuff like that. And if you're familiar with Lake Master, it's super handy.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
Yeah, you guys got gators down there.
Yeah, if we got one big gator,
Okay.
I think there's another small one kind of running around that's been spotted a couple times. Let me tell you how this came about. Was it 2017, 2018? No, it would have probably been a little after that. Probably like 2019, actually. We had a huge flood in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the Arkansas River has gators in it.
Okay.
And people know that. You'll see them. And there's a lot down towards Pine Bluff, but there's some in that little rock pool. And long story short, Polarum Creek, which is the creek that has been dammed up that created Lake Conway, when it flooded as much as it did and all that water came in from Oklahoma down the Arkansas River, it came back up Polarum Creek and went over the dam at Lake Conway.
Wow.
So my theory is that gator came into the lake when that flood happened, because he was spotted for the first time shortly after that flood. And before that, no one ever seen a gator on Lake Conway. Now, I think it's a good thing for the lake. Our beaver and nutria rat population is way higher than it needs to be. So I hope he has survived the winter and continues to thrive out there. I've seen him one time, and I think I was one of the first people that spotted him. Back in the day, I used to fish a lot of those online KBF month-long tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the phone, actually, coming in after night fishing. And I literally remember saying this. I'm like, talking about an old college roommate on the phone. And I'm like, dude, I was like, I don't remember seeing a log there. And all of a sudden it went underwater and swam off. And I was like, dude, I swear to God, that wasn't a log. That was a gator. He's like, dude, there ain't no gators in Conway. 2 days later, somebody posted a picture. They saw a gator on Conway, and it was that dude.
Wow.
So I think I may have been one of the first people that ever spotted the sucker. But I do have a theory that he came in whenever that lake flooded.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, he seems to kind of mind his own business. And if you get close to him, he'll go under the water and swim off and kind of disappear.
That's kind of scary.
I will say this. He's a big son of a gun. I was in that night I was in my old town, Topwater, which is 10.5 foot. And all right, sorry, I'm back. But that night I was in that 10.5 foot Topwater from Old Town, and I felt a little uncomfortable. I'll tell you that. He was at least 10.5 foot long, if not bigger.
Yeah, that's too big. I think he could probably be about 4 or 5 foot, and I still wouldn't want nothing to do with him. Now, when it comes to that, the autopilot, I'm in a Hobie, and I have a Motor Guide XI3 with the spot lock that I can put on there, but I don't know that I'll put it back on there, for this next season. I just really prefer not to have it. And I get that there's a difference between my setup and yours. Like, what is your take on that? Like the pedals versus the motor. And then you were kind of talking about making a bit of a trek. I think maybe you were talking about pre-fishing or day one.
All right, sorry, man.
Okay.
If it keeps up, I'll walk downstairs and see if it gets any better.
You're good. Okay, so just running the motor. So you have both pedals and the motor option between your two different kayaks there. But like, tell me like the pros and the cons. Like, if are you ever leaving the motor at home and taking the PDL in certain situations, or like what does that look like?
I tell you, one of the other kayaks, or not kayaks, I also have a Discovery solo canoe
Nice.
that probably weighs about 30 pounds probably. It's super light. And
Yeah.
I've taken that sucker a couple times in the tournaments. Last year on Dardanelle,
Hmm.
I should have stayed in that on day 2. Was I leading after day 1? Yeah, I was leading after day 1.
Hmm.
And I feel like I would have won the tournament if I'd have stayed in that, because so stealthy, and just you can get in so much shallow water.
Mhm.
But on day 2, I knew that those fish were closer to the ramp, so I was like, "Oh, I'll take the pedal drive. I don't need to dump in at the wildlife management area way in the back. Like, those fish have moved up closer to the ramp because the water dropped." So there's certain situations I will actually take that little solo canoe.
Hmm.
I'll tell you the difference in the thing that I love about the pedal drive: automatic reverse.
Yeah.
You can't beat automatic reverse when you got a fish hooked up and it's swimming right at you,
Yeah.
and you're trying to drive the hook home, and
Sure.
it's, coming at you. Like, when I'm in that autopilot, that's the one thing, that is a big difference, is you're pretty stationary while you're landing the fish.
Hmm.
There's been times when I've landed a fish, and while I'm fighting a fish, I'll reach down, grab my remote, and hit spot lock. That's a little bit different.
Hmm.
But when you fish cypress trees, like I do a lot of our lakes here have them. Um, that's a time that I would consider taking the pedal drive over the motor, just because you can, like I said, kind of hit that automatic reverse and pull the line, pull the hook into that fish a little bit more.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
if you're on the Tennessee River chain, though, you're making long runs like I
Yeah.
tend to do when I'm there, I want that motor.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine you could probably cover quite a bit of water, and you're going.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of speeds are you getting out of that thing?
About 4 miles an hour if you have a clean prop. If the prop's been dented up, it goes a little bit slower. Good thing about those props, they're only $5 each at the local kayak shop here. So,
Really?
um, they're not too expensive. But and even if you take weight out of it or add weight to it, you're still
Hmm.
really not getting any more or any less. 4 seems to be kind of where it's at right now, which is plenty for me, for what I do for the most part. But I'll tell you, like on day 1 of this event, when it was windy, it was really nice just having the spot lock and hitting the button.
Yeah, that's kind of what Ian's talking about over here in the comments. He wants a autopilot to be able to stand. That probably wouldn't be, a main selling point for you, but I could see where, standing, being in a spot lock, situation, you don't have to worry about messing with the rudder. You don't have to worry about, anything like that. He said he was watching Chad Davison stand and flip docks in the high winds during day 1. He said
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's what sold him on it.
Well, and I
Um,
tell you, another cool thing is I'll, put that thing on, speed 2, and run down a bank and just
yeah,
throw a chatterbait. And my hands are free. They're on the reel the whole time. I'm controlling the rudder with my feet, and I'm just running, right down the bank there, and just, covering water.
yeah, and I guess at that point, like I'll tell myself that I'm going to do that, but I have full control over how fast I'm going, with my feet. So if I get distracted or if I see something that catches my eye, I'll end up spending too much time on it, and I'll say, hey, I'm gonna do just what you're talking about doing. But I guess if you just click a button and let it do its thing, you're kind of somewhat
Yeah.
committed to actually following through with your plan. It might help you keep those blinders on a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else that's cool now. I'm not as tech savvy as some of the other people, like the Casey Reeds of the world. But,
Yeah.
some of those guys have their autopilot set up, where they can run a bank, and they'll also tell it to communicate with their graph. And they'll say, hey, keep me in 4 foot of water, or keep me in 8 foot of water. And
Okay.
it'll go down the bank and keep them in that the whole way. Because the autopilot, you can
Sure.
actually have it talk to the hummingbird, you know, graphs and all that good stuff. Now, I'm not as tech savvy as those guys to figure out how to make it do all that, but you can also put it on like a true north heading and it'll do that. Like, it's got some cool features that I don't even utilize. Like, I'm a rookie when it comes to using this thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so like I have that on my bass boat. Like my Ultrex trolling motor is an iPilot Link, so it talks to my Humminbird graphs,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I can follow a contour line. I actually didn't know that the autopilot had that link feature. That's cool. That is a pretty big selling point for somebody that's gonna utilize it. And a lot of people don't think that that is a feature for bass fishermen. You know, they just assume that the people that want to follow contour lines are trolling. You know, they're pulling baits. But like you're saying, you put it on a real low speed and you can use it to stay on, you know, the outsides of spawning flats, or, you know, whatever you're trying to do. You can kind of use that autopilot system to help keep you far enough off to where you're not spooking those fish. Turn it on a real low speed so you can sit there and kind of cover some water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I actually didn't know that. I had assumed that it wasn't a link system like that, but
I think there may be like some sort of little circle thing you have to buy to put on the kayak, from what I've seen. But yeah, you can definitely do it.
Nice. Yeah. So the other thing too here before we call it a night is for those people that maybe want to go see the video. You said this is just the day 2, right? You didn't have day 1?
Yeah, day 1 was really tough to video because of the wind. You know, my little boom that I have that, you know, holds the GoPro, actually it had rocked back and forth so much that it came loose, and then it had like spun around the back of the kayak, and then I'd put it back in place, and then the wind would rock it some more and it'd spin back around the kayak. So I didn't know what I had on and what I didn't have on day 1. So I was like, you know what, if this works out and I do well on day 2, really, that's probably anybody wants to see anyways.
Yeah. So anybody, you know, if you're watching the podcast here on YouTube, you'll be able to see Garrett Morgan outdoors on YouTube. And yeah, for those of you that might be listening after the fact, make sure you check him out on YouTube. He's got some tournament videos, and if you want to see how he came away with the win, that one is up and got quite a few views already.
Yeah, you know, I got a lot of good feedback on that. That was the first time I've played around. Like I said, I'm not a real tech savvy person, but that was the first time I played around with voiceover. And I wanted to share kind of my thought process as I'm working, trying to get those fish to bite. Because a lot of those fish that I got to bite on day 2, I didn't catch them on the first bite. I mean, there was one of them that I had bite 3 times before I got that fish.
Yeah.
You know, so I thought it was just pretty cool to you know, share some voiceover. Hey, this is what was going on. This was my thought processes. This is why I was changing baits. This is what I was doing. I got a lot of really good feedback already. Just, you know, people commenting or sending me messages saying like, dude, this is your best one so far. And, you know, some of those early videos are probably a little rough to watch, you know, but that's like with anything we all do, right? We learn a little bit as we go. So I'm hoping to be able to continue this over the summer, film more events, and just put more content out there. And I enjoy sharing with people because that's how I learned. I mean, you know, I didn't have anybody showing me when I grew up. I've learned from other people. I've learned from failure. I've learned from getting my tail whooped in tournaments and talking to people at weigh-ins, and you know, some folks that would share with me some things over the years. So I don't mind sharing. Hey, this is what I was doing. This is how I was catching them. You know, because you know, if people didn't do that for me, I wouldn't be successful at all, and I'd still be trying to find my way with a lot of you know, the seasonal bites that come along.
Yeah. I think the voiceover thing was probably a good touch, because that's why people are watching these videos. I think that there's an entertainment factor there, but people are wanting to, take your experience and learn from it. So yeah, any little bit of insight that you can provide like that, what goes into making that cast, I think, or repeating that cast,
Mm-hmm.
I think that sort of thing, people really do appreciate, and they can take that information and replicate it on their bodies of water, wherever they're at.
Yeah,
A lot
absolutely,
of it.
man. And going prior to the event, I was like, should I leave all these videos up? Because there's a lot of Lake Conway stuff on there.
Yeah,
But I
like
was
you
like,
noticed you're getting all these views the night before the tournament.
you know, but I was like, I kind of felt bad for guys that were traveling in because there's not a lot of content on Lake Conway. So
Sure.
I was like, you know what, just leave it up because before I go to bodies of water,
That's funny.
I'll get on here and look
Yeah, yeah.
and try to figure out kind of where I want to go or watch some people catch fish. So I left it all up the whole time, because I wanted people to come here and have a good experience. I wanted our body of water to show off a little bit. I hate that the weather did what it did and we didn't see several 90-inch bags throughout the course of the event because the lake was capable of doing that, but
Yeah.
unfortunately the weather that came through on Friday really, made the bite that we had Monday through essentially Wednesday just take a nosedive.
Right. So was the weather, you think, a big factor in the attendance? Did that keep people from making that trip, or is it just the distance from kind of, I guess, home base for a lot of those guys?
Man, I think there were a lot of factors that played. Um, and one of them, this was the first year that our local club made people pay a membership.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the economy's doing okay here in Arkansas, but people ain't making millions here in Arkansas.
Yeah.
So they forked out a little bit more money for a membership for that, and then in order to fish the All American, they were going to
I
have to
got
do
you.
a membership, and so I think that kind of kept a lot of the locals. We had like
Hmm.
67 people that fished the
Yeah.
event on Saturday, and I think just the fact that they weren't used to paying a membership for a local club. And there was a
Yeah.
little bit of belly aching about that. I'll just tell you
Oh
that.
yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
so we went through that transition as a local club, and then this All American Series comes, and people were kind of on the fence about it, and some of them just didn't want to pay the membership, and it kept them from doing it. So I
Sure.
hate that because we got some really good anglers, and I know some of them would have done really well, in the event, and um, I feel like there was a lot kind of going on in the region as well as far as local events and a couple
Sure.
national events that took place that weekend too. So pulled some people away.
What is it about, maybe for those people that haven't fished an event with the All American, like what is it that draws you to fish those events?
I think the people, everybody's really cool. Like when we had the LinkedIn over at Taylor Mays, everybody grabbed a beer, had a burger, hung out, just normal dudes,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
nobody thinks they're too good for anybody, or everybody talks to everybody. We all shared information. We talked about the fish we lost, talked about the fish we caught. But it's just normal everyday guys. We all have jobs. Like we're not professional kayak anglers. Like
Sure.
we're the normal dude with a. All right, sorry, I'm back. My phone's got a little bit of battery left.
Okay.
But anyways, long story short, the All American Series just your normal everyday dude, that has a job, that works, that takes care of his family, and that you can have a beer with. And that's what's so cool about it. And I fished that the classic on Truman the last 2 years. I loved it. They put on a good show. Everhart, of course, does a great job supporting that whole piece. Everybody from my table that first year walked away with more prizes, than
Yeah.
what they paid in entry fees as far as value.
Yeah.
So if you've never been to that classic, it's worth going to. I hope I can make it myself this year. I think it's on the 22nd up there at Truman. But I think that's the cool thing about it is you just got everyday guys that you can hang out with, drink a beer with, have a burger with, and just talk fishing.
Yeah. Heck yeah. I like it. And, in a lot of these tournaments, one, because of the entry fee, is a little bit higher. So there's a little bit more money to be won. And I think typically they're drawing some pretty decent attendance. So,
Yeah.
There's some pretty decent money to be won at them as well.
I mean, I won $1,800. That was pretty cool. I mean, we didn't even have that big
Right.
of an event. And let me tell you something. If you win one of these events, you might want to go hit the gym beforehand because that trophy's heavy.
It looks heavy.
That sucker
is. Yeah, and there was
a lot.
only 21 anglers in that event, and you won $1,800 for first place.
Yeah, I mean that's
and I'm sure
payday.
They paid out 3 or 4 spots. I'm sure. So, yeah, that's not bad at all, really. Yeah, that is a sweet trophy. I had it up on the screen here at one point just to show everybody.
Yeah, it's real wood. That sucker's heavy. Josh handed me that thing, and I looked at it. It was kind of a cool moment, but I was like, man, that thing is heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever does that, they do a good job with it. And it's going to be something that I treasure for the rest of my life. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it's got my home lake engraved on it.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's so nostalgic in that it's where I got my burning just desire to go into the kayak fishing world. I just signed up for an event.
That is wild.
On my home lake, and I won it. And then all these years later, I go back to the same area where I say I'm never going to fish again because it bit me in the butt. And that's where I end up winning the event, essentially. And this trophy has the entire lake carved out on it. It's just really cool and something that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. I'm glad I signed up and fished it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. That's a really cool story and kind of went full circle there. So I appreciate you kind of giving us a little bit of an insight. Hopefully you didn't feel like you were just telling the same story over and over again tonight. I appreciate you jumping on here.
No, I think we went into more depth and kind of some different routes. So it was fun, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll be watching you. What does your schedule look like for the rest of the year? I'm assuming you're fishing more of these All Americans and you're going to do some national stuff.
I'm probably going to hit the one in September for the All American. And then I'm hitting.
Is that in Kansas?
I think so. And then I'm hitting Hartwell in 2 weeks with Bassmasters. And I got Kentucky Lake Hobie event on there. Nice. I got an area in that lake that I feel like can win an event, but I've just never timed it up right. As I've always been there the wrong time of year, and I think this is the right time of year. So
nice.
Got my eyes on that one. But I'm really looking forward to the All American Championship at the end of the year. It's here in Arkansas, a lake that's going to show out. A buddy of mine is from that area. He's got a buddy that fishes it a lot of big fish caught out of there. Big boats don't get on it a lot. It's kind of a hidden secret here in Arkansas. So I think folks will be pleasantly surprised to see what that lake does.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, I probably won't be out there on these national events, but I'll see you at the strip pits in September for sure.
Sounds like a plan, man. We'll do it.
So, all right. Well, thanks again. And it was nice having you on. You have a good evening, and we'll be talking to you soon and definitely following you along for the rest of the season.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, guys. So that is a wrap for season number 2, episode 11. We had first-time guest on tonight to talk about his big win at Lake Conway. Kind of a cool deal. This event was where he fished, or this venue, this body of water is where he fished his first ever kayak fishing tournament, and which he won. So yeah, that's kind of cool to hear that story come first full circle. And all the different, techniques, maybe. I mean, that wasn't really going to stand out. That really wasn't going to win the tournament. It wasn't going to be necessarily a bait. He probably could have done it on plenty of baits, right? And we talked about switching it up on day 2. And I think just recognizing, the information that these fish catches. And sometimes, you're going to be able to gather information off of losing a fish or, something like that as well. Maybe you just visually see something. I think it's important to really take all that information that you're given throughout the day and do something with it. And if you don't, then you're not going to have, these opportunities to come away with the win. And Garrett definitely capitalized on catching that pair of fish that definitely salvaged the tournament for him. But not only that, gave him the information that he needed to catch the limit that he caught on day 2. So I think that's really important. When you guys are out there on the water, you're catching fish, you've got all these different things going on in your head. You've got all these emotions. You've got, kind of a preconceived notion of what you should be doing going into the tournament, what baits you're going to be throwing. You've got all this stuff going on in your head. But if you don't kind of adapt to the conditions, but if you don't also use the information that you're given, then you're just out there kind of fishing, right? And that's, people are going to win tournaments that way, but that's not how you're going to be, consistent in finishing finishing well and winning tournaments. And he's definitely won quite a few tournaments. I remember seeing him last year winning one of the Bassmaster open events that they had. And he's definitely somebody who is in the top finishes quite regularly, especially in his area there. So anyways, guys, I do want to thank you for tuning in tonight. I know we kind of probably confused some people about how we were going to go live at 8:00 and didn't end up going live for an hour later. So for those of you guys that were still around, I appreciate you. And for those of you that weren't, no big deal, because you can always come back and watch or listen. And all of you guys in the comment section tonight, I definitely appreciate you. Organic, hope to see you soon. For all of my Kansas guys, we've got our first tournament of the year with the Kansas Kayak Anglers this weekend at Big Hill. I'm super excited for it and look forward to seeing all of you guys there. If you are interested, go to KansasKayakAnglers.com. We have an official website now, or you can go find this event on Tourney X. Just search Big Hill. So sweet. Derek's going to be at Big Hill. Look forward to seeing you, man. It's been a while. Everybody else, I'm going to sign off. It's getting to be my bedtime. And I appreciate you guys for all tuning in. If you haven't, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We posted a video today. If you guys are interested in getting into forward-facing sonar and you're looking to maybe purchase a unit, Humminbird has some really good deals going on right now. I posted a video telling you about it, how to take advantage of the rebate. Check that out. And also, we did some on the water content here not too long ago. I've been going out on the local creek here, and I've been smashing them with the spinner bait. So not only can you see some of that in one of my latest videos, but also you got to see a little sneak peek inside of Russell Marine Products' newest edition. So go check that out if you guys haven't already. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.